Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to you with this week's online Parsha class for Parashat Beha'alotecha. This is this Torah portion is, as we normally do, is divided into three according to the triennial cycle, and we are focusing on the first third of this week's Torah portion, which is the first Torah portion after the holiday of Shavuot, in which, just like the holiday of Shavuot, which is a pilgrimage festival of the Jews going to the temple to offer sacrifices, the first fruits of the year, this Torah portion also deals with the temple, but not having to do with the first fruits, rather having to do with the lighting of the menorah. That the menorah is one of the most famous Jewish symbols of all time, and that is actually in this week's Torah portion where we learn more about the menorah and its placement in the temple, and how its placement, what its role is for the Israelites for the people of Israel while it is in the temple. And as such, we're going to be looking at the only one of the lines in the Torah portion, actually the second verse, because it deals, I think it's a very interesting line in terms of understanding what this menorah really is and what its purpose is all about, since the Torah actually does not have so much detail about the purpose of the light, and so we have to kind of understand it for ourselves. So as such, we're going to now turn to this week's Torah portion by using Sefaria.org. We'll just take a moment as I get to the page. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Daber el Aharon ve'amarta elav. Speak to Aaron and say to him, Beha'alotecha et hanerot el mul penei hamenorah. That, just use the translation here, and then we'll go back and understand it deeper. When you light the lamps, the seven candles, or the seven lamps, shall give light in front of the menorah and in front of the or I should say in front of the candlestick. Vayas kain Aharon el mul penei hamenorah ha'ela neroteha ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. And Aaron did thusly, placing these candles opposite or in front of the actual menorah, just as Moses had instructed him. V'zeh ma'aseh menorah miksha zahav ad yirecha ad pircha mikshahi kamar'eh asher har'at Adonai et Moshe kain asa et hamenorah. And I'll just translate here. And this was the work of the candlestick, beaten work of gold, until unto the base thereof and unto the flowers thereof it was beaten work, according unto the pattern which the Lord had shown Moses, so he made the candlestick. That is the extent to which we have information about the menorah. The next session, beginning with verse 5 and verse 6, moving on, is having to do with the Levites and getting them ready to perform their duties within the course of the temple. So the text actually has very little to say about the menorah. So what can we glean from these very few verses about the purpose of the menorah? And we're going to be focusing in that light. And since we have here really kind of two particular ideas, you have what the menorah actually consists of, all the different lamps, and then you have how this candlestick was actually created and all the different kinds of gold and materials thereof. We're not going to be focusing on that line. We're only going to be focusing on the structure of this menorah. So looking at verse 2, you have this line of Daber el Aharon ve'amarta elav, that Aaron should that Moses should say these words to Aaron. Beha'alotecha et hanerot el mul penei hamenorah ya'iru shivat hanerot. So the construction of the sentence is a little bit odd, and we're going to begin first with this word beha'alotecha. And for that, I'm actually going to turn We're going to do a little bit of grammar together to understand this word a little bit. So this word is broken down. You could break it down into 3 distinct parts. Let me just make sure. Okay, so we have this one word. Just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to put it into the center here so it's easier to see. All right, you have this one word which really can be separated into 3 words, into 3 parts. The first part is the word bet. Now, bet here can simply mean in, or perhaps, just going to change the view for a second. Could be in, could be when, it could be as. So this is it's the prefix to the actual word, and it kind of gives a little bit of a direction or how it is that we should be. What is the context for which we're reading this particular word? Then the final one is the final chaf, which is, I'll leave that be for a second, which is the possessive, meaning yours. So in something yours, or when you are whatever it is, meaning that we're talking about something that belongs to someone else, that a person has completed. It's either an act, or it's meaning it's either a verb, or it's actually something that is, or it's a noun or something that belongs to someone else. Now, because of the possessive of the chaf, we actually know that this is referring to a noun, because yours is referring to something that belongs to you. If it was a verb and something that you would do, then it would be a different letter. It would actually be the letter taf. So we know this word is, this ha'alot is actually a noun, but it's a very strange noun because it actually is a verb, or it actually looks like a verb. That the word ha'alot is the he-feel of the root aleph, ayin, lamed, hey. And by he-feel, I mean it's a certain kind of construction, so that the he-feel, the most important letter regarding to a he-feel verb is this first one of a hey, and that the ayin here is actually the first letter of the root, which the word for verb in Hebrew is pa'al. So when you hear the word hif'il, that the fe there is the same as a pei, meaning it's the first letter of the root. And because of the construction of because of the word of the root Allah, the ayin is a guttural letter, and because it's a guttural letter, it actually changes a little bit of how the root is put together in its he-feel form, as well as the letter hey. That the letter hey also causes a bit of a change. But the purpose of this is to say that the he-feel form of the root of Allah, so it's ha'alot in verb form, equals to cause to rise up. Meaning that the word Allah is the same word as when you have an aliyah to the Torah, that you come up to the Torah. When you're making aliyah to Israel, that you go up to the land of Israel. And the purpose of the hif'il, of the hif'il tense, is that it, or form of the verb, is that it means that it is a causative verb. So Now going back into the construction of the sentence, you'll notice right away that this is a little bit odd because ha'alot is a verb, and yet we're talking about something that is a noun, something that is an object that belongs to someone. So in essence, you have here a very strange word that is open to many different kinds of interpretation. And as such, what I want to offer is that what it all means, what this all means at the very end of the day, beha'alotecha, what it means as when you have caused something to rise or something to go up. And what's also important in the context of speaking about it with these nerot is that the term Allah is also referring to actual lighting of a flame, meaning that the flame is also going up. So what is that actually, how is that understood by the rabbis? And so now we're going to turn to Rashi, the famous French commentator, and he writes, medieval French commentator, and he writes this term behalotecha, al shem shehalahev olah, that the flame of the fire of the light actually goes up, olah. Ketu behadlaktan lishon aliyah, because the language of the phrase to light something, meaning when you're lighting a flame, is a language of going up. Shetzarich lahadlik ad sheteheh shalhevet olah me'eleha, that you light it until the flame decides to go up on its own. And I think that what this is referring to actually is if you ever decide to light a flame, and when you light it, you can see that the wick is being lit enough so that the flame is starting to rise, is starting to cause it to actually be up in the air, meaning that it is continuing to grow until it is a full flame. So on one hand, it seems that Rashi is referring to this term of beha'alotecha in the causative sense as that when the wick itself, by the nature of itself, is able to raise itself up straight, that you do not need any other oils, any other kinds of materials in order to make this flame go up. Rather, the flame is able to rise in and of itself. It kind of causes itself to move up. But what is the you here? What is the yours that it is referring to? In the sense that it's saying when you have caused to rise up, when you have caused something to rise up, what is this you that it's referring to? It seems to be referring to the person who is lighting the flame, or is it almost speaking to the candles that it's saying when you candles have actually decided to rise? So for that, we're going to turn now to his second commentary. Actually, we're going to skip the second one. We're going to turn to the third one. Ya'iru, actually, before we get to the third one, we're going to focus on the second one. And this is in regards to the second half of the verse when it says, El mul panei ha-menorah, that the menorah is considered to be opposite, or considered to be, as the exact translation was here, that in front, the translation according to Sefaria is that it's in front of, but the other option is that it's referring to something being opposing something else, meaning that if I am standing in front of you, I say that I'm standing el mul, I'm standing opposite of you, which could mean in front of, but it could also mean just opposing one to the other. So when Rashi sees that, he understands el mul panei ha-menorah to mean el mul ner emtzai she'eno bekenim ela beguf shel menorah, So what it means is that all the different candles that are on the branches of the menorah, that they are opposing the center candle, which is not upon the branches, rather is simply upon the body of the menorah. So that's very interesting if you think about the construction of a menorah, that we normally think of as a menorah as this 7-branched or 9-branched candelabra, but rather the menorah that it's speaking of is actually just that single branch leading to the shamash, which is right down the middle. And so you have here, you have this idea of the menorah is actually being that center candle, and then all the other candles are simply facing it from either sides, which leads to this second part. His third commentary in terms of Ya'iru Shivat HaNeirot, that when you light the 7 candles, Shisha She'al Sheshet Takanim, that you're lighting the 6 on each side of the branches. Shlosha HaMizrachiyim Ponim Lemul HaEmtzai, that the 3 that are on the eastern side face the one in the center. Haptilot Shebahem, meaning that it's the wicks that are facing the center. V'chein Shlosha HaMa'arviyim Rashi Haptilot Lemul HaEmtzai, and thus also that you have the 3 ones on the 3 candles that are on the western side that are facing the middle menorah. So again, if you have the middle menorah here, you have the 3, 1, 2, 3 that are facing towards the middle, and again the middle is a little bit higher, and then you also have 1, 2, 3 on the other side, which are also facing the center candle right up in the heart, right in that center line. And so now we have this idea that you have these different candles which are separate than the actual menorah. And so perhaps what it's saying is that when it says Beha'alotecha, that when you shall cause to something to light, or whether it is when your lifting up has occurred, meaning that it is something that belongs to you which is caused to go up at that moment. Maybe what it's referring to is actually it's speaking to the menorah, and that what belongs to the menorah are actually those 6 candles on each side. So almost as if the text is speaking to the menorah and saying, menorah, when your candles have been caused themselves by the fact that the wicks light themselves and go straight up, that when those candles go up, so on and so forth. And the fact that this understanding of the word Beha'alotcha can seemingly indicate that we're not necessarily referring to the Israelites who are lighting the flame, though we may actually be speaking with the candle, the menorah itself, in terms of what its purpose is, almost speaks to the you could call the divine nature of this menorah, that it is an entity in and of itself that has this special kind of consistency to it, this divine character to it, which almost requires the possessive form in which something belongs to it. And that, I think, is important when we're thinking about why it is that we're lighting candles in the first place. And for that, I want to actually turn to 2 other sources to understand a little bit about the context in which menorot are lit. So the first one we're going to turn to comes from Leviticus chapter 16, verse 2. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, daber el Aharon achicha, ve'al yavo v'chol et el hakodesh, mi beit la parochet el penei hakaporet, asher al ha'aron, ve'lo yamut, ki be'anan era'e al hakaporet. And the Lord said unto Moses, Speak unto Aaron thy brother, that he come not at all times into the holy place within the veil, before the ark cover which is upon the ark, that he die not. In other words, Moses should be warning Aaron, don't come too close to this holy space because I am here. And how does God appear? For I appear in the cloud upon the ark cover, i.e., God is appearing through light. Oh, sorry, God is appearing through the cloud. And I'm kind of jumping myself because how do we get from cloud to light? And we turn to Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 4. Vayarom kevod Adonai me'al hakruv al miftan habayit, and the glory of the Lord mounted up from the cherub to the threshold of the house. Vaymaleh habayit et ha'anan, and the house was filled with the cloud. Vehechatzer mal'ah et noga kevod Adonai, and that the court was full of the brightness of God's glory. In other words, that God here is manifested as this light, which is a very popular concept in the ancient Near East, that a deity would appear or manifest itself as light. So you could imagine then looking at this menorah that is put into the temple, in which the context for the term beha'alotecha seems to be referring to the lighting of candles that are causing themselves to be lit up, and they belong to something else, that perhaps the menorah, the individual candle that stands right in the middle, is supposed to represent God. And then all of the other candles are supposed to stand opposite of God, to be looking at God. As if to say that when we light the menorah, we are actually causing we are causing the cloud of God to rest upon us, to rest in our home. That is a potentially very dangerous kind of idea. The idea that in lighting this candle, in lighting this menorah, and then having the other candles sort of look upon it, that we're actually creating a divine manifestation here, as if God resides in our temples. And you could imagine that if someone were to raid a temple, I don't know, I think it's happened before, but if someone is to raid a temple and to burn out, or not to burn out, to extinguish that flame, you could almost imagine that it is as if they are extinguishing God. As if God needs that flame to exist, and when that flame is extinguished, then God exists no longer. That's something I think you could understand from the context of which this text was written. And that's where the rabbis come to say, don't think like that. And so we go back to Rashi, to the end of that last comment, which I intentionally did not read. He is seeing these other different candles as facing towards the middle candle, which could potentially lead us to think that those candles are there in worship or in honor of the central candle as God, but he sees something different. Vilama, and why are these candles facing the center? Kedei shelo yomru leora hu tzarich. And why is this so? So that no one will say that God needs light. And it seems from this perspective that the way in which Rashi is choosing to read this verse is that when you light a candle so that the wicks are faced towards the center, it is not faced outward to show great light upon the temple. Meaning, if you ever walk into a room that just has a menorah, you're not going to be seeing that much light because it doesn't give it off, since the wicks are faced inward. And it is the very fact that they're faced inward, not outward, that according to Rashi, shows that God doesn't need lights because there isn't so much light in the temple. And so he doesn't view that central candle as representing God here, but looking at the whole light as supposed to be representing God. And because that light is at a lower level, since it's faced inward. Therefore, it teaches us that we may need to have light in order for us to have a sense that God is present, but that God doesn't need that light in order to exist. And to kind of expand upon this idea and to more deeply understand how these lights are designed in order to not show that this light represents God, we have a commentary from Rabbeinu Bachia, who's another medieval Jewish commentator. He writes, "Behalotcha et hanerot el mul penei hamenorah ya'iru shevat hanerot." When you cause the lights to be raised opposite the menorah, you shall light 7 candles, i.e. the verse from our Torah portion. Lishon beha'alotcha, this language of that you shall call when something is caused to be lit up. Al shem hashalhevet shehi olam me'eleha. That's referring to the flame which rises upon itself. This is nothing new. This is what Rashi said, that the flame that is caused to rise itself is the flame that appears upon the wicks of the candles, in which it just goes straight up. You do not need any other oils to make it light. To make it lit. Ve'achachamim zal, and the sages of blessed memory, osin otam milashon iloi. They use this language of to rise up. Shekach amru b'midrash, because as it says according to our midrash in Midrash Tanchuma, behalotcha, on this word of behalotcha, amar kadosh baruch hu, that the Holy One, blessed be He, said, Lo she'ani tzarich le'ora shelachem. It is not that I need your light. Ella sheta'iru lefanai kederech shehe'arti lachem bamidbar be'amud ha'esh. Rather, that it is not that I need this light, rather that you shall make this light before me. Kind of referring to that el penei hamenorah, or el mul hamenorah, that you shall do this in front of me, in order, in the same manner that I showed you in the Bamidbar with the cloud, with the, how did I translate that? With the standing of the fire, or with the cloud of fire. Kedei la'alot etchem bifnei ha'umot. And so, in other words, that God is saying here that I'm not doing this in order to say that I need this light. Rather, you need this light because just like I gave you a light when you were traveling through the desert, so do you need a light to guide you while you're here in the temple. Kedei la'alot etchem bifnei ha'umot. And the whole reason why we use this term aliyah is in order to make yourselves rise before the nations, almost as if you're getting yourself stronger. You're standing more straight in front of all the nations. Sheyiyu omrim he'ach Yisrael me'irim. He'ach Yisrael me'irim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu lefi shehu me'ir lakol. And that they might say to you, the Israelites, how, I'll just do what I translated here earlier. I'll share with you the translation that I had written for this line. That they said, how will Israel light before God, since God has lit their entire way? Or in other words, that after Israel has already left the desert and come into the land of Israel, maybe God is not necessarily showing them the light as God was beforehand, so how will they know the light towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu if the Kadosh Baruch Hu was the one who always lit their way? And so the reason is, and so in order to answer that question, that's why we light a menorah, to say, no, God's light is still here. V'halo mitoch hachoshech hotzeti ora. And is it not that it was from the darkness that I took you out of the land of Egypt? Ve'eni tzarich le'ora shelachem. And I don't need your light. Ve'harei ha'enaim shebe'adam yesh betochan lavan. That the eyes of human beings have within it white. Ve'eno ro'eh mitoch lavan. But you do not see out of the light, out of the white, ela mitoch hashachor. Rather, you see it out of the darkness. what this, I think, is all trying to come and say is that, number one, the light that exists in the temple is for the purpose of for the Israelites to strengthen themselves before the other nations, to say, here, we know that God is with us. This is for our sake, to boost ourselves up, to be stronger in front of the other nations who might claim that we no longer have that connection with God because God's no longer showing our way. And so we need that light. But that last comment, I think, is even more powerful, and something that is just a nice one in general, that if you look at someone's eyes, you don't use the white of your eyes to see, you use the black of your eyes to see. And so similarly, it is God does not need the white or the light, but rather God is seen through the darkness. God exists beyond the darkness. Or you could even say God saved the Israelites out of that moment of darkness, which was a plague right before the plague of the firstborn. So the rabbis are kind of really trying to emphasize that not only does this light not represent God, or it does not actually refer to God specifically, but that if it's meant for anything, it's for our purposes to be able to understand that we may want the light in order to help us know that God is there, but we don't need the light because we know that God is not in the light. The light is only a symbol to point towards God, if anything. The light is only a symbol for us, but the light is not actually representative of God, and we shouldn't worship it. So whether we have a candle, whether we have a great menorah in the temple, and then we use that light in order to connect ourselves to God or connect ourselves to prayer, to worship, whether it's on a Friday night at home, whether it's in the temple in Jerusalem, whether it would be in Jerusalem, that we see that light as more of a guide for us. And we don't see that light as representing God and God's self. And that understanding that difference will help us come to a realization that God is greater than any light or even any darkness that is out there. And with that, I hope you enjoyed today's class and see you again next week. Take care and all the best. Bye-bye.